I remember last fall when our Creator was starting to show me that Saul of Tarsus was the abomination of desolation. I told my wife that I was not sure if Yeshua was prophesying about our flight being this winter or the next winter, but that we had to flee in order to obey him. So we did. He was still proving to me that Saul was this abomination, but he had not yet shown me all of the proofs that would eventually lead me to make this declaration to the world. I knew at the time that Saul was false, and I believed that my Father was showing me that he and his writings were the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, but I did not have the proof yet until July of this year. He gave me proof. He gave me the proof and led me to post the video with this announcement on July 22nd. But who has hearkened to this announcement? And who has fled to the mountains? Most have not even fled on a spiritual plane, less more on a physical one, and some have fled on a physical plane, but not a spiritual one. So few have fled both ways, and now winter is about upon us. Yeshua warned us in Matthew 24, starting in verse 15, "Therefore, when you perceive the abomination of desolation spoken of through Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, perceive and discern. Then those which are in Judea should escape into the mountains. The one who is on the roof should come down and not even take out of his house. Neither should the one who is in the field return back to take his clothes." He's obviously putting urgency on this and giving his physical examples to show us he's talking about on a physical plane as well. Judea is referring to those who are returning to their Creator and returning to his truth at this time, who perceive or understand this prophecy. They understand the abomination. And like I said back then, I didn't have it proven to me last year, but I believe that's what he was showing me, so I acted on it. Today is the high Sabbath that is referred to as the 8th day that follows the Feast of Temporary Dwellings in my location. This high day was yesterday for those in the U.S. and other parts of the world. This special Sabbath was given to us to point us to the great white throne of judgment. But before those who are not part of the 144,000 can get to this judgment, they need to get to the millennial rule of the kingdom of Elohim. And before they get to this 1,000-year period, the people will need to be humbled by their Creator, because they will not hearken to his word. At least most will not, but some are hearkening to him without his wrath encouraging him, and these people are definitely going to be found in his favor in the coming days. This coming time is the time of tribulation that Yeshua was referring to, and the affliction is about ready to begin. Yeshua said a couple verses later in verse 20, "Moreover, pray that your flight or your escape be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day, because then will be great tribulation, such as has not been seen since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever will be. And unless these days be shortened, there would be no flesh saved. But for the elect's sake, these days will be shortened." Most have not hearkened to the warnings that our Creator has been sending out, both physically and through his servant and end-time witness. The specific Sabbath day that Yeshua was referring to in this verse is this 8th day Sabbath that we're in. What will you do with this information? Most of you have not hearkened to the warnings and have not fled, and now you are facing a flight in the winter if you will be able to. Like I said, some have fled physically, but still have not turned to his truth that they will need to embrace in order to be delivered. And a lot of them haven't left the lies of Saul, and of course they fled not because they seen the abomination of desolation anyway, but they seen the other signs, they seen the warnings on the physical plane. But they have not fled the lies, and they will need to. This high Sabbath was set apart from other Sabbaths to point us to the great white throne of judgment, as I said, that will occur after the 1,000-year reign of the kingdom of Elohim. But it is also being used by our Creator as a benchmark for what is ahead, and to witness against a people who have not hearkened to his warnings. We are only 19 days from November 9th, which could very well be when the destroying angels are let loose. Spoke on this, and I will show you why it might very well be the day of a great earthquake and the beginning of the major time of affliction. Or the major time of affliction might even begin in the coming 19 days, and the destroying angels let loose on November 9th. I want to give you some information that is associated with this date and the 188-day earthquake pattern that many of you know about, that has been associated with the comet Elenin. July 22nd, when I posted that Saul was the abomination of desolation, was exactly 40 days after June 12th, when the sixth trumpet began to sound. Like Yeshua said in these verses in Matthew 24, the days would be shortened for the elect's sake, and they were. So the major effects of these first six trumpets have been held back until now. November 9th is also exactly 40 days after this year's memento of acclamations that most erroneously call the Feast of Trumpets. It is also exactly 150 days from the anniversary of the Exodus out of Egypt, that is next April 7th. In case you do not know, the destroying angels will be let loose for a 150-day period of time to hurt all who do not have the seal of the living Elohim in their foreheads. November 9th is also exactly 150 days after June 12th, when the sixth trumpet began to blow, showing a mirroring effect. This means that there are 110 days between July 22nd and November 9th, or 10 11-day periods of time. Might want to get a pen and paper and back this up and put some of these dates on paper, because it's pretty incredible. Kind of hard just taking in from an audio. Our Creator uses numbers for symbolism, and Satan mocks his symbolisms and perverts them to throw people off track. People think that the number 11 is evil because of 9/11 and things like this. Other places that Satan uses the number 11. The number 11 is not evil. Our Creator uses the number 11 as well, and Satan's uses of it are just rabbit trails that he set up. And 9/11 was allowed to happen by our Creator anyway. He rose up the people who did this to send this warning, as well as the other warnings that he has sent. Satan caused the earthquakes. Of course, a lot of people think that they're man-made, and there could be involvement with that as well, but it doesn't matter. It's our Creator's allowed it, and he's showing that he's allowed it in his perfect timing. And he's behind it. He uses people in his chastisement. Look at all the records in the scriptures, how he raised up people to humble Israel. Satan is just a pawn that likes to mock and deceive. The first six trumpets began to sound 11 days apart, minus the first one being held back 3.5 days to reflect the time that Yeshua was dead, and to reflect the time that the other witness will be dead on the streets of Jerusalem. The period of time between the Passover this year and June 12th was 55 days. 55 is half of 110 days, or 5 11-day periods. Is this a coincidence? I'll go on and you tell me. The first date that I was led to put forth in these videos was January 15th, 2011, which I believe was the day that the last of the 144,000 was sealed. I did not know it at the time because I did not yet understand how to calculate the Feast of First Fruits, but this day was 550 days from what would later be determined as being the beginning of this feast for 2012. Is it a coincidence that this date is 550 days, or 5 110-day, or 50 11-day periods of time leading up to the day of Yeshua's return at the end of July 18th as the 19th begins next year? 50 is the number for the Jubilee. So is all of this a coincidence? It could be, but it would certainly be a stretch to say so when you tie in the recent earthquakes that were sent to also serve to warn the people that were 188 days apart. Maybe it is also a coincidence that I was able to bring forth the Ezekiel 24 sign, even though our Creator said that when this sign comes, you can know that it's from Him. Maybe this is just a coincidence too. Let me add some more trivia with this number 11 and 55 and tie it into his number 40 that he uses to stamp his judgment with. 55 days after March 11th, the Japan tsunami was May 5th, which is the first day of the second month in our Creator's calendar. 40 11s, or 440 days after May 5th, led up to the end of July 18th, 2012, when July 19th begins Jerusalem time and Yeshua returns. Some have understood the 188-day pattern between 3 major earthquakes and their relation to Comet Elenin and alignments and such. But when September 15th came and went and no major earthquake happened, it broke the pattern. find out here, if you follow along through this, that the pattern really wasn't broken. It just wasn't quite as simple as they thought it was. And it certainly doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Ellen and alignments either. That was certainly a sign and a warning as well. The signs in the heavens, all of them that are happening, are definitely warnings. He said there'll be warning signs. 188 days after May 5th is November 9th, so there is a 55-day gap. Could this be a coincidence? Also, the Japan tsunami was exactly 40 days before the wave sheaf offering during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So we see this 40-day stamp. The 9.0 Japan earthquake happened at Sendai. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but Sendai, Japan. Sendai means 1,000 generations. 100, I think you probably know the scriptures there. That he'll pay people back for 1,000 generations and stuff for their iniquities and stuff, and reward those who love him and obey him. 188 days before this earthquake was a 7.0 in Christchurch, New Zealand on September 4th, 2010. I don't think that the name Christchurch is a coincidence any more than the name 1,000 generations is a coincidence. But you tell me. And Christchurch, New Zealand had another earthquake on February 22nd of this year. This 6.3 earthquake was exactly 110 days or 10 11s from the beginning of the blowing of the sixth trumpet on June 12th. This earthquake was also exactly 55 days or 5 11s from the Passover this year, which was on April 18th. A very interesting pattern of numbers 55, of the numbers of 55 and 40 indeed, especially when these dates tie in with our Creator's set apart times like they do, and how they tie in with these earthquakes. I'll keep going. I have not gotten into our Creator's use of numbers very often in these videos because it is not about the dates anyway. I have not spent much time even studying them, but when I do, it is amazing what he reveals. There are other numbers such as 23 and 12 and 19 and others that have lots of hidden correlations and symbolism as well. His use of the number 23 in relation to the Levites is pretty cool. Lots of examples of that. I can just share one with you. November 9th is 253 days from Yeshua's return on July 19th of next year. 253 is 11 23s or 23 11s. Levi was the 23rd generation after Adam, and there are other uses of the number 23 in Scripture that are associated with the Levites and tie into now, but I'm not going to get into all of this now. These numbers are not what this is about, but he embedded some things in numbers and set them in place to show his almighty power to time things down to the nanosecond. And they are to be his signs when it is his time to give them, to reveal them. No one could have figured out the 55-day gap without being given the timing of the trumpets. The first Christchurch earthquake that happened on September 4th, 2010 was 188 days after the 8.8 that happened in Concepcion, Chile, I believe is how it's pronounced, on February 27th, 2010. Is the name Concepcion a coincidence, even though it means Immaculate Conception? How about this one? The map that I looked at said that the Concepcion, Chile earthquake is 5,500 miles from the Christchurch earthquake. This is 500 11s. Is this a coincidence as well? July 19th, 2012 minus February 27, 2010 is 873 days. Plus 40 days of judgment is 913 days or 83 11s. This 40-day stamp landed on January 18th, 2010. November 9th of this year is exactly 660 days from January 18th, 2010. This is 60 11s. What is really interesting is the map that I looked at. It showed that the Japan-New Zealand quakes were 6,000 miles apart. You have one set of them, 5,500 of the three earthquakes, one set of them 5,500 miles apart, another 6,000 miles apart. The reason I think that it's interesting that with the 6,000 miles is 6,000 years of man is coming to an end next year, although it's being cut short 228 years, which is also part of this prophecy of the days being shortened. Spoke on that before anyway. Many prophecies have dual or even three applications. If you remember, a bit ago I said that January 15th of 2011 was 550 days from the beginning of July 19th, 2012. So he uses 660 days in one scenario and 550 in another. Both are divisible by 11 with the numbers 50 and 60. And of course I mentioned the 440-day gap too. So yeah, I'm not sure what the 770-day gap would have revealed back then. I read the dates on it, but I didn't recall anything. But I didn't look at the news either for that. But anyway, here is another one for you. July 19th, 2012 minus July 22nd, 2011, when I was led to post the video on Saul being the abomination of desolation, are 363 days apart. This is 33 11s. And remember that July 22nd was 10 11s from November 9th, or 110 days apart. I could keep playing with my calculator because I am sure that there are more coincidences, but this is enough for now. Like I said, it's not about the dates anyway. Just want to share some of them with you because it's pretty cool how everything kind of is adding up, and he's showing his almighty power and his hand in things. But it's about obeying our Creator. It's not about these numbers. He said that he will deliver those who will return to him to become as he is. Will the destroying angels be let loose on November 9th, or 40 days later, or 55 days later, or even as late as February 20th of next year? Will this date be the fourth earthquake on the four corners of the 188-day pattern? I do not know. I just know that the destroying angels will be let loose, and there is also a tsunami coming to the west coast and to other places in the very near future anyway. And I do know that it is a very special Sabbath today that represents the great white throne of judgment. I know it's the last of its kind before Yeshua returns. But for now, you need to worry about being found in his favor so that you can be delivered into the 1,000 years, so that you can be prepared for this judgment. As I said yesterday, circumcising the male children on the 8th day also represents this day of judgment. Try to do a separate video on this subject, but in a nutshell, we were created to have our hearts circumcised, to be in agreement with our Creator's heart, and he gave us his Torah to accomplish this. All who refuse to hearken to this circumcision process and these temporary dwellings will be burnt up at this judgment. So it all ties together. So I suggest that you start letting him circumcise the foreskins of your hearts and flee from being stiff-necked and believing in the lies. Whatever happens on November 9th or another date will take care of itself if you are obeying your Creator. And obeying him means obeying his Son as well, and he told us to escape into the mountains. So I suggest that you hearken to his instructions. And this means more than just on a spiritual plane. So many want to try to think. To not obey is saying that you do not believe that he commanded us to escape. Yes, he can deliver us wherever we are, but he also told us to escape, so we have to obey him. He wants us obeying on a physical plane as well to prove us, and actually to prove ourselves to ourselves. It's part of the sharpening process. The children of Israel had to cross the Red Sea. He did not just zap them out of Egypt into the Promised Land. They had to go through a process. I would get out of the cities while you still can and get off of the coastlines and head to the hills. Of course, as I've spoken in several of these videos, escaping on a physical plane will not deliver you in and of itself either. You will need to turn to all of the truth, to all of his truth that will deliver you, and you will need to return to it for the right motives. You will need to return to it because you really want to start desiring to become as he is. And you will have to turn from everything that is false. Flee from that as well. The reason that he said to pray that your flight not be on this Sabbath is because his Father's desire for you was to perceive the abomination before this day and to obey him before you were shoved into obeying him. But the good news is that winter has not quite intensified yet, so he is still telling you to get while the getting is still possible. Short window left. I cannot tell you where to go, but I can tell you that I would not want to be found holding on to the lies of Christianity and found in the cities of America and her allies, or the coastlines, as I said. And I can tell you that there is a second Exodus in store for those who will turn to and hold fast to the truth that he is restoring. And I can tell you that time is short, because the days will not be shortened for much longer. But the choice is yours to obey him and escape into the mountains or not. And this is both physical and spiritual. Ultimately, he is going to have to do the delivering anyway, but we need to show him that we believe him by obeying him. Abraham still had to raise up the knife, and all who have hearkened still had to obey on a physical plane as well. Obeying him is how he proves himself to our minds, so that we can learn to trust him in a deeper way and understand in his provision. They still had to march to the Red Sea, but he's the one that had to open it, so he will certainly rain down manna if he has to, or whatever else. But he's wanting his people to obey him. And putting him to the test is not the same thing as obeying him. The children of Israel could have said, if he is going to deliver us, then he can zap us to the promised land. Actually, some of them probably said this, and they probably died there, because not all of them came out. And look at what happened when they would not trust and obey him to go up and fight when he told them to, and he said he was going to deliver them. They were sent to 40 years, a sentence to die in the wilderness. Believing is action required. Our actions refine our beliefs and purify our minds. Blessed is he or she who is found so doing whatsoever he commanded when his Son returns.